Initiate your sonic metamorphosis.
Broadcasting from the Millennium Student Center here at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. This is UMSL Student Radio, the U.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another installment of That Science and Nature Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Howard, and today I'm joined by Sebastian Forward.
Hello, everyone.
And Andrea Chigueros.
Hello there.
So a little later in the studio, it's that point in the semester where things are starting to pick up. So a bit of a skeleton crew, but we can carry the show as we do. So lots of fun things to talk about today. We're going to talk about plants crying. We're going to talk about Italy banning synthetic meat, and we're going to talking about what's the other story? I always forget the third
Spiders
story.
in the pool.
Spiders in the pool. Thank you. We'll also
Deadly spiders.
Deadly spiders in the pool. Thank you. We'll also go into our topic of the show, which is all about misinformation, how that might be harmful. But first, we're going to recap on something we haven't done in several weeks that we said we would, which is March Mammal Madness. So if you remember several episodes back, we filled out our brackets on all the mammals that were competing. We spent the entire hour show doing that. And it's not quite over yet, but we have gotten to the final four, which they jokingly refer to as the final roar. It's a pun on four. So it's the semifinals. And up until this point, we have four individuals. So if you remember from way back when, there's four general categories. We had your Mighty Stripes, your Itty Bitty Comeback City, your Animal Engineers, and your Dad Bods. So leading the charge for Mighty Stripes is the Okapi.
I think that is what we thought. We here led with the Okapi.
We did. I got a lot of points for that one, so I've been keeping tabs in my bracket. All right, for Itty Bitty Comeback City, the one that made it to the semifinals, that is the Rock Hyena. Or sorry, Rock Hyrax. Yes, Rock Hyrax, which I also guessed. Though that's not really itty bitty. I remember we discussed this weeks ago.
It's like the size of a rabbit.
Yeah. All right, and then for your Animal Engineers, the one that made it to the semifinals is the Golden Eagle.
Yeah, golden eagles are pretty dope.
Nice, yeah.
I guessed something different.
They're like the size of a turkey. Like they're huge. If you see one in person, golden eagles are much larger than you would think a golden eagle would be.
And then lastly, for the Dad Bods making it to the semifinals is the Wolverine. So
Makes sense.
I had the Siamang, so that lost.
Do we remember why this one was a good dad, a good parent?
No, I do not remember.
We failed.
All right, but of the final four, so the Okapi, the Rock Hyrax, the Golden Eagle, and the Wolverine, do we have any bets on who's going to make it to number one?
I'm just going to go for the golden eagle.
Okay.
Yeah, do you think a golden eagle could lift a wolverine? What's their lifting capabilities here?
I think it could. Well, no, I don't know if it could actually lift the wolverine, but I do think it has this like flight advantage where it could just like kind of go at it and then go up, and with those like really fierce talons, it can do good damage to the wolverine. I think.
That's fair. That's fair. They're like. I wouldn't want to take a wolverine head on. Those things are terrifying. But if you could keep your distance, might stand a chance.
Yeah, I'm going with the Okapi just because that's the one I got right so far. So I'm just going to keep going with that and see if we can bring it all the way.
They do have some kind of weird like giraffe horn things going on. So they do have some weaponry there.
Mm. Well, that's where we are for March Mammal Madness. I believe the semifinals and finals are both this week. So by next week, we should have an ultimate victor for March Mammal Madness, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll get back to you on that one. But for now, we're going to transition into the news. So our first article today comes from Live Science, and this is all about deadly spiders falling into pools. So basically, we're in Australia, where many where deadly creatures live. And a lot of inhabitants from the heavy rains that are currently occurring are seeing lots of venomous spiders fall into their swimming pools and almost getting bit by them, which is kind of terrifying.
I would only guess, just because we have our desert tarantulas and whatnot in the United States that come out after rains to go breed and find mates. It seems like it makes sense if they're doing the same thing over there. They're wandering out, leaving their burrows, looking for love, and just fall into a swimming pool.
Yeah, I thought this was kind of fascinating. So this species, so these are known as funnel web spiders, and this is like one of the more deadly spider species. So they'll like go, kind of on the ledge of the swimming pool, but they can fall inside. And what was amazing to me is that they can actually survive in the water and still bite you underwater. I'm not sure how long they can actually survive underwater.
It's a while. You know insects can drown. Like they can't just survive in water, but because they're cold-blooded and whatnot, they don't need anywhere near as much air as we do. So yeah, they can float around for a while before actually drowning.
Yeah, that was terrifying when I read that. They're like, oh, the spider can still bite you underwater. I'm like, but won't it, ingest a bunch of water when it opens its mouth to bite me? I mean, maybe Becky should be here to verify how.
I mean, they got fangs, so they can stick those into you. They got needles there, so they can stick you with those wherever the spider is. But I'm guessing the spider probably wouldn't want to do that. It would probably crawl onto the top of your head, which is above water, and then, like, hang out there, which is better, but also maybe not if you're the person having spiders crawling all over your head.
Not necessarily spiders, but have either of you had encounters with wild animals like this, finding them in places that you were not expecting to?
Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of spiders, and I guess like the ones that we usually think of in North America are like the recluse spiders, right? But these are very, they're recluse, so they're very shy species. They are not going to bite you unless, they catch on clothing and you like grab onto them accidentally, or they're like pushed up against your body with the clothes or something like that, then they will bite you. And so a similar thing happened to me with a scorpion when I was in Costa Rica. And I had been, telling other people, like, watch out for scorpions, like, check your shoes. And I had left my luggage just a little bit open, right? I had closed it, but I guess the zipper wasn't completely zipped. And, one day I just open up my suitcase and I put my hand in blindly, start searching around for something, and then I just feel the sting, and I immediately knew it was a scorpion. And yes, there was a scorpion stuck to one of my clothing, and yes, it hurt like hell. But the scorpion survived. We managed to safely escort the scorpion outside of the room.
That is a good thing to do. The scorpion didn't want to interact with you either. That's for sure.
That's way more restraint than I would have shown. I would have like grabbed the nearest thing and like attacked it.
No.
Well, I did remember someone else told me at this Airbnb that I was staying, it was like a little bed and breakfast, and she was like, you should just kill the scorpion. I was like, but it wasn't the scorpion's fault, it wouldn't have bitten me unless if I hadn't been, if it hadn't felt attacked by my huge hand going after it.
I will say there was a time where I was camping in a tropical part of Hawaii, and there they have cane spiders, which they're not dangerous. They're not venomous like these funnel webs in Australia, but they are massive. They're like maybe 4 or 5 inches wide as like the whole spider. That the thing can like cover a good bit of a plate if you put it on one. And yeah, I got bit in the butt by one of these things when it like crawled into my bed when I was sleeping, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I just like my butt hurt, and I was like, oh, I know what's going on here. I know why this is happening. And yeah, no, that spider made the wrong decision there.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't had something quite that drastic. I mean, I've been, like, stung by a jellyfish in the ocean, but that wasn't, like, a place where the jellyfish wouldn't be.
Oh, but that's fascinating.
Yeah.
How did that feel, being stung by a jellyfish?
That really hurt. I remember I was, like, I think 11 when that happened. I just remember being in the water, and there's, like, searing pain just hit my shoulder and spread all the way out. And then I was like, I didn't even know what happened. I didn't see the jellyfish. And I just, like, came out, like, crying, and then my mom had, like, bring me the lifeguard, and they smeared some, like, sandy paste on my shoulder. And it kind of helped. I don't remember what it was, but...
That reminds me of a video I just saw online of some guy at a beach who just picks up this jellyfish that's like the size of a dog and like cradles the whole jellyfish in his arms. and then learns at that point that jellyfish sting, as like the whole front part of his body is like lighting up in pain because he just basically bear hugged a jellyfish. So
Yeah, I've seen a lot of videos. Like, definitely, guys, don't pick up wildlife that you're not sure are
Good rule of
venomous.
thumb.
Good rule of thumb: don't pick up wildlife that you don't know about.
All right. Fun stories. Now we'll transition to our second article, which this is all about synthetic meat. So this comes from BBC News, and the title of this article is Italy Moves to Ban Lab-Grown Meat to Protect Their Food Heritage. So basically the article is saying with the advancements we have in technology, we're starting to produce more synthetic meat sources, which are more environmentally friendly and have less of an ecological footprint. However, the Italian government is kind of pushing back against that in their country, saying it's kind of ruining their sort of culture and their, what's the word I'm looking for?
Tradition?
Their tradition, thank you. In terms of their food and how they eat it and consume it and part of their sort of lifestyle. So I thought that was kind of interesting clash, if you will, between sort of environmentally friendly and culture. I didn't think there would be that kind of pushback from the government. It seems like a big initiative the government to make for something like that.
I think this is a very suspicious thing to me because, you know, everybody in the world is starting to have access to like artificial meat products. Like you can get a Beyond Burger or whatever, you know, all over the place. And the only people who don't want artificial meat products to exist are the like cattle lobbies and like the companies that are responsible for producing non-artificial meat. So my guess is this is a big lobbying effort on behalf of some of their food companies, which got the government to ban something which would be competition for them potentially in the future. That's my take on that. I don't know if that might be controversial, but...
So do you think the government stating that it's negatively impacting their culture and traditions sort of a cover?
I would not say the availability of a Beyond Burger is a damaging thing to local culture. I think, you know, people generally like things about their culture that are good and keep them when they can. And I think the availability of new products on the market does not really, like, it's not gonna topple the whole industry, and if it does, that just means that people prefer the alternative. I feel like that's just kind of a market economics thing going on here.
What is a Beyond Burger, by the way?
Yes, that would be a Beyond Burger is basically an artificial hamburger using a bunch of kind of like plant products, and there's a lot of engineering. It is like an engineered hamburger to be as close to a hamburger as possible without being a real hamburger. So basically, it's just a beef-free hamburger, which once again I think they're kind of pricey at this point just because they're a new product, but they taste like a hamburger. So it's not like, I don't know, things used to be pretty bad in the fake meat territory, but the technology has progressed.
What's your take on synthetic animal products overall? Like, do you like the idea that you're eating something grown in the lab? Does that bother you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Sebastian that, you know, the reasons that the government state, you know, might be kind of hand-wavy, and there might also be, you know, financial incentives for them to ban lab-grown meats. So I think it is a little more controversial, right? Lab-grown chicken, just because it's relatively new, so people are unsure of how safe or good it is for you. And I think those are like normal issues that arise with any new technology. But, you know, technology is improving, and the FDA has already approved lab-grown chicken meat. And so personally, I think from an environmental point of view, I think this is excellent news. And, you know, it'll save, a lot of space. So imagine, well, think of all the space that farming uses, right? All the pasture land, and all that space, where you could use vertical space in a building to grow all these meat products, right? I think that's really promising. I think it looks good.
I think this is a good point to kind of highlight that agriculture is a massive chunk of all carbon emissions and all sources of pollution. Beef production itself is like 15 to 20% of all global carbon emissions, which is equivalent to like all the cars and planes in the world combined. So, the livestock industry is one of the biggest sectors in the world contributing to climate change and to carbon emissions and whatnot. And the simple fact is that a Beyond Burger uses a tiny fraction of the amount of resources it takes to make an actual cow burger. So once this stuff goes mainstream and once a Beyond Burger is cheaper than beef, I think we will start to see a lot of environmental benefits come from that.
Yeah, I'm curious to try one because I have heard many stories about this. NPR did a story years ago about them trying to perfect the, meaty taste with the price, with the texture and all that stuff. So I'm very curious to try these products just because I want to know what they taste like and can they fool me, and I'd say fool me in a good way, that this tastes like meat and it seems like meat.
Yeah, I think they can. I've tried the Beyond Burger as well. I don't remember if it was the Beyond or the Impossible Burger. I believe it was the Beyond Burger. But they're both plant-based, and I thought this was wow. This actually satiated my craving for a real hamburger. I've heard other opinions though, so that's where I think lab-grown meats can come in handy for people that actually really want that meat. Yeah, it's real meat. It's just cultured in a lab. Yeah.
I think these things. I'm somewhat skeptical about the chicken cells grown in a lab kind of thing. That it's really hard to do that. Just as a process, growing individual animal cells is kind of hard. So, I'm betting on kind of mass-produced artificial meat before kind of lab-grown real meat. I'm guessing one will come before the other just because it's a lot cheaper, but only time will tell.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I think we already have access to really good, plant-based synthetic meats, and I think we still have a long way to go for regulated for FDA approval of lab-grown meats and cultures.
All right, cool. Our last story comes to us from Futurism, and this is all about plants and their ability to cry, which is not something you would traditionally think plants would do. But according to some researchers who published this in the journal Cell, they basically put the plants under stress, whether that was clipping off bits or dehydrating them, and sort of recorded the sounds that they'd make. And apparently, plants in distress kind of give off this popping, clicking noise when in distress.
I'll say that this whole kind of system comes down to the fact that a plant is basically just a whole bundle of little tubes that are getting water to go from the roots to the leaves, and all those little tubes are actually under a bunch of pressure. And whenever you dry the plant out or stress it, those little tubes, those columns of water, will actually pop and break because there's pressure going from one end to the other. So this sound, it's above the frequency that humans can hear. It's an ultrasound frequency. They make little popping noise as their little water columns snap. So it's poor plants.
Okay, so if you're interested in how this sounds, yes, we have a recording. Let's see if we can play this over.
Yeah, if you hold up to the mic, it should pick it up.
Let's see. Okay, so that was not us tapping the microphone, but that was the plant, quote unquote, crying.
So yeah, it comes across as like a clicking, snapping sort of sound, not something you would traditionally think of when you think of a plant. Does this make you think any differently of plants? They cry, or they have this sort of, for lack of a better word, emotional response? We're kind of anthropomorphizing the plants a little bit.
I wouldn't go that far.
I think it is interesting that they found, so they used machine learning, and they found that they were able to identify like the source of stress based on the sound that the plant made, right? So it made like a different, I guess, frequency or timing of these sounds based on whether it was dehydrated, if it needed more water, or based on whether it had just recently been cut. Which, that was pretty interesting to me.
Yeah. I think the plants have no control over this. This is just kind of like a mechanical thing that's happening in the plant, which just so happens to make sound. But I think the interesting thing about this is that some insects can actually hear ultrasound. And I don't know if the frequency of these plants matches up with what insects can hear, but I think it is entirely possible that these insects might be able to hear the plants which are under stress, which would be a kind of a signal to the insect that the plant would be vulnerable and a good source of food. So I think this could totally lead to some actual like behavioral research.
Do you think other plants could potentially hear these stress vocalizations from the plants? I mean, plants are known to communicate via other signals like volatile compounds or chemicals that are, kind of
Released
diffused in
from
the
the
air,
plants.
or through root systems. Could they potentially cue? I mean, we know that plants can detect sounds, right, or like vibrations or other things like that. Could they potentially detect sounds from other plants because of stress?
I think that a plant wouldn't really care about. I'm trying to think of what a plant would do if it knew that plants around it were like getting dehydrated. I feel like they'd probably all be getting dehydrated at the same time, so there might not be like the other ways that they can communicate generally relate to pests, such as when one tree gets infested with an insect, it will release a chemical that lets all of the other trees in the area know, and then those trees will produce chemicals that will kill those insects, so they'll like be able to defend against it. And I don't think that there would be a good adaptive reason to have this just for this particular danger.
I'm just imagining the plant getting up the clicking noise and it being similar to like an animal whimpering when it's dying. So the insects are like, all right, this plant's going to die. Let's go in for the kill and eat all the leaves.
Yeah, no, they do that. And, insects are very good at detecting weak plants because, a normal healthy plant is, they can fight off insects, but it's the ones that are really struggling and the ones that are, dying of drought or something else. Those are the best target.
Yeah, and if it's a sound that the water just makes mechanically, can't really help itself. But yeah, so it is an interesting question, right? Who's listening to these sounds, and can they cue into them?
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, that is going to wrap up the news. So we will be right back after this little break to talk all about misinformation. Stay tuned.
Initiating sonic metamorphosis.
Broadcasting from the Millennium Student Center here at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. This is UMSL Student Radio, the U.
And we're back. So now it's time for topic of the show. And this week, we are going to talk all about misinformation. What is it? How does it impact us as scientists? How does it impact us generally? But before we get into that, to kind of have a fun little introduction, because this is going to be kind of a serious topic for the show, which, depending on the week, we may have more serious, more cavalier topics. But we're going to play a little game, and I was expecting there to be more of us, but we'll just play it with the three. Well, the two, because I'm hosting it. So we're going to play a little game called Real or Fake. I'm going to read you a headline, and based on the headline, you're going to tell me if this is a real story or a fake story. all of the stories were published on the internet in the year 2021, so this is a little bit old, but they were all published. So yeah, tell me if it's real or fake.
Bring it on.
So there are 8 of these. So we're going to start with number 1. Number 1, and this is just the title. I can't give you any other information. All right. NASA is installing internet on the moon.
I'm going to go with fake.
Yeah. I don't think anybody needs internet on the moon, and we already have like satellites that orbit the moon and like relay signals back and forth. So I feel like if you want signal on the moon, we figured that out a long time ago.
So it is in fact a true story.
Dang.
It is
wow.
NASA is building a 4G network on the moon, enabling them to control lunar robots.
Ah.
Oh, okay. I can see the utility.
I thought they already had that under control. I guess not. Maybe it was only 3G before. Maybe they're still analog. I don't know.
Okay. All right, number 2. A university banned the use of capital letters to avoid scaring students.
Ooh, there's a lot of universities out there.
And there's a lot of seemingly random banning happening.
Yes.
I'm still going to go with fake for this one.
Yeah, that seems I could be wrong. That just seems too basic in grammar to try and legislate against. It's like no punctuation. It'd be hard to get away with that.
All right, so do you have a guess, Sebastian, or are you?
I'm gonna say I think it's false.
You are both correct. It is in fact fake. So it was
Yes.
originally a not quite as intense story that was misreported to be more dramatic.
As they often are.
All right. Number 3. A couple in California named their baby with an emoji.
Well, I don't know what the laws in California are for naming. I mean, some countries do have them that prohibit certain names. I don't know. Hollywood, California, there's a lot of lenience, I think, in naming.
But I believe names have to be allowed by a judge. Like somebody has to allow it. So you can't name your child after like the worst people in history, and like there's someone who will veto that in the legal process of like registering a name. So I think you do have to go through a process that would prevent that.
Well, whether the story was true or fake, I might just click on it just to see what are they talking about. What emoji?
It is
to
very
begin with.
enticing. It is very enticing.
I want to say fake again. I may be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think the legal system is set up to allow emojis.
You are both correct. It is in fact fake. It is from a satirical news website. So it's not a
Excellent.
true story. So you got that one also. All right, number 4. An 8-year-old girl pulls a medieval sword from lake.
True.
Yeah, I want to say true. That's also very cool. Very sword in the stone. Yes.
You are correct. That is a true story.
I believe I read about this.
Oh, really?
Yes, this is in Northern Europe. Is that correct? I believe this was.
Yeah, it was reported by The Guardian and BBC and a couple other sources.
Yeah. It was a girl in Northern Europe, like out camping with her family, and she walks a little bit into a lake, and then finds like a Viking era long sword, which.
That is awesome. What an amazing find.
Yeah. That is one hell of a summer find there.
All right, number 5. German street covered in chocolate after leak from chocolate factory.
Plausible, I'm gonna say.
I think that could happen.
If no one's ever heard of like the Great Molasses Flood,
I was just thinking in
yeah,
Boston.
yeah.
Can you enlighten me? I don't know what this is.
This was a national tragedy because it killed like a bunch of people when a whole silo full of molasses broke and flooded a whole part of the city, and people like drowned in molasses, which
This thick boiling liquid
Oh my
going
God.
down the street.
Wait,
Yeah.
when was this, like 1900s, 1800s?
it was like more than 100 years ago.
Okay.
Before safety was invented.
Yes, dark history of Boston. Yes.
Okay. Before safety was invented.
Yes. Just drowning in molasses. It's a bad way to go.
So the chocolate.
So chocolate. I mean, I think it could happen. Whether the street was like covered in chocolate, I don't know. Sometimes these stories get overhyped, right? There's a little bit of exaggeration. But I'm gonna go for true.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, you're both correct. It did in fact happen. It's reported by the Washington Post. All
Did
right.
anyone try to eat the chocolate?
Based on this Guardian article, it does not tell me that. It did cover the pavement, though. That's what it said for the chocolate.
Go swimming.
All right, number 6. School bans parents from sports day for bad behavior.
Yeah. Parents can have really bad behavior.
Yeah, I think this is a very plausible one.
You are both correct.
Especially, I will say, just in like COVID times, like I could see a thing of just banning all parents because people wouldn't like behave or listen to the rules that people tried to set up. Is this a pandemic thing?
Again, don't have that info from this quiz.
All right, fair. I'm guessing it's a pandemic thing.
Okay, number 7. So we have 2 more. Spinach is taught how to send emails. Spinach is taught how to send emails.
I mean, it sounds like the title, or like something that in a children's book. Spinach is taught how to send emails.
Is taught how to send emails is the title of the article.
I want to say outright no. That sounds so absurd. But I don't know if it's, kind of a misleading title.
I think this is true. I think I've seen this as a botanist. The plant-related news articles tend to end up on my feeds, and I believe I did see that they strapped electrodes to a plant and then somehow programmed those electrodes to send emails. Is this true?
You are correct, Sebastian.
It
This is a
is
true
true.
story. So I had to look this up because what Andrea alluded to is right. It sounds very misleading. It's not like the spinach was there typing out letters and hit send.
Yeah.
What happened was they hooked up electrodes to it, and when the plant was like under dehydration stress, it would send an alert based on like a change in the
Oh,
probe.
yeah.
So it's not quite
Yeah.
as ludicrous as the title makes it
Yes.
sound.
They got the plant to send you an email to water it, which I love that. I love that so much.
All right, and our last question for the quiz is this. Gorilla learns to knit. Gorilla learns to knit.
I don't think so. I think that sounds like a difficult task. I would not guess that a gorilla could knit.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see this
We
happening.
can train gorillas to do a lot of things.
Sure.
But they're normally like simple actions or like, I don't know, there's a lot of precision to knitting.
And a lot of timing involved.
Yeah, you have to like understand why you're doing
Yeah.
things.
Like, where would the reward come in if that's how you're training the gorilla? Right?
So you're going with...
Well, gonna guess false.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go with false, too.
You are both correct.
There
it
we
is a
go.
fake story that was based off a fake photo contest on the internet.
Fake photo contest, okay.
So I guess someone photoshopped a gorilla knitting, and then a story was spun out of that. So, all right, I think I didn't tally up how much you guys had, but I think you guys got like pretty much all these right. So you're pretty good at deducing the fact from the fiction. So that was a fun little quiz, but the point of that was to act as a little prologue to our topic, which is all about misinformation. So we live in a very information-heavy age because of the internet. We have access to so many things: videos, podcasts, news articles, social media, all that stuff. And it's really easy to get information. However, it's also, because it's easy to get information, it's also easy to get a lot of wrong information or be influenced or swayed by information that may not be looking into providing the best, most accurate representation of a topic or a story.
People can just say things.
People can just say things like we're doing right now.
Yes.
But we're a legit show, so. But I guess I kind of wanted to start off the discussion with why or maybe not why, but in terms of misinformation, why do you think it's so easy to be misinformed?
I think, this is one of the issues that's really important to me, and this is something I think about a lot, and I think misinformation and pseudoscience, as you call it, is such a problem because people like to trust science, and people generally understand that science is a good way to understand things, of like gathering information and trying to have facts be the basis of the decisions that you make. And we're generally on the same page that science is how you figure things out, which means that if you want to push something that's totally wrong, you have to make it sound like it's science. And that is why I hate pseudoscience so much, is because it uses our trust of science against us by just kind of making stuff up and saying that it is a fact, when in fact it is a lie. And it's just totally wrong. And you're like, that sounds right, but it just sounded right. It isn't actually right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Sebastian that it's very easy to present something as kind of fitting what you expect science to look like, right? It comes from a legitimate person, a credible source, right? Someone with a PhD, someone with an advanced degree is saying this information, right? Dr. So-and-so said this.
A person with glasses and a lab coat.
Yeah, pretty much. Also, if they have published books, this makes them credible. If they have a nice looking website, that's something that looks like looks legit, right? It looks like something you can trust. The presentation of numbers, statistics. Numbers can lie, right? You can manipulate data to look or to show something and, interpret it as something else, right? Correlation is not causation.
What does that mean for our listeners who may not know what that means?
It means that data can show that something is correlated with this, right? When, let's say, let me think of an example.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No. That's a great question. So, for example, I don't know, let's think about COVID, right? So let's say there was a relationship between, COVID infection, right? It was more severe with people that had red hair or something, okay? So someone could find that data, maybe they can even pick and choose that data to show that positive correlation, but that doesn't mean that if you have red hair, you're more susceptible to getting a severe COVID infection, right? So that's correlation does not equal causation. And there's several examples that you can find, like really absurd examples that you can find of this on the internet if you look it up.
Yeah, for my students, when I used to teach at a community college, the one I would always use to illustrate correlation just being that, like, you can line up any two variables and make it look like they're linked, but they're not actually. The causation means, like, one variable is linked to the other, so, like, if we change one variable, the other one will change. The one example I love so much is, I believe it's, like, the number of pirates versus global warming, or how warm the Earth is. So, like, they showed that, like, there's a huge decrease in pirates from, like, past, or, centuries ago to now, and then the temperature of the Earth has gone up. So they're like, the temperature is being warmer must be because we have less pirates. So we just link these two absurd variables together to make it look like one affects the other, when in reality they don't. Or we don't have any reason to suspect that they would.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. I like that one.
I feel like the whole numbers and figures thing is it's so easy to trick people with statistics. Like you can just say a number and you sound credible. And unfortunately, if you are not within a scientific community, if there are not people fact checking you, like if there is not someone like actively looking up everything you say, then whatever you're talking about, you can just make it up, and a lot of people do. And from my experience, a lot of people push misinformation, or they share misinformation without knowing it. Like it's just something that they think to be true, and they share it. But I think a lot of these things originate with somebody trying to make money off other people. Every one of these these things starts as a scam. It's somebody trying to steal someone else's money, and they make something up that sounds scientific and convince a bunch of other people to buy it. And I feel like, unfortunately, that's how we've ended up with a lot of our anti-scientific practices.
So I want to go back to something you said earlier, Sebastian. So you said generally people trust science. I don't know if I entirely agree with that. I think it might be more split than that. I think we like to think people trust science or scientists, but the vibe I kind of get, and not that I'm like scouring the dark corners of the internet looking for conspiracy theories, but I kind of get the vibe there's a split. I think a lot of people do, and I think a lot of people don't. Do you get that vibe at all?
I have seen statistics about this that looked at, critical thinking abilities and trust in science as two different variables. Like you can give someone a quiz and figure out how much do they trust science, and then you can give them another quiz and figure out, what's their critical thinking capabilities, how analytical are they. And unfortunately, trust in science actually makes you more vulnerable to fall for pseudoscience and for lies that are being pushed and, conveyed in the format as science. And it's only the critical thinking that really gets you to be able to avoid the misinformation and avoid the pseudoscience, because it lets you kind of actually like rip apart the things that aren't factual.
That's interesting. So you would kind of fall more easily for these tropes of looking credible, right? Like a PhD, a doctor saying this, showing these facts. Okay.
Yeah. If you like do trust science, but you don't actually know how it works, it's much easier to convince you that something is science when it's just a marketing scheme or something like that. So I think, there has been a big boom in like direct anti-science stuff like that. There has been a wave of anti-scientific thought in the country and the world recently, and that is a huge problem in itself. But I think it's unfortunately a bit wider than that, because even people who do think they believe in science, you can still be vulnerable to misinformation either way.
So do you think there's a way to make ourselves more trustable as science and have, people trust our information? Because my knee-jerk reaction is people who don't care about science, or let's say people growing up, science was not their favorite subject in school. So once they were done with those high school classes, never touch it again outside of reading, whatever article is thrown their way. Is there a way to get those people kind of in our court, so to speak? They may or may not trust science, but it's not their favorite thing, and they're not going to go to the person with the PhD with the lab coat and the glasses, or, maybe watch that very high-end documentary. Is there a way to get those people, the common man, the every person?
I think, it may sound a little dark, but I think the critical thinking stuff is something that you kind of have to learn before you learn a bunch of other stuff. In my opinion, it's kind of the most important thing to learn, because it really sets the stage for everything else. Like I think our education system is really kind of missing the point in, teaching us everything we have to know and completely omitting how to critically analyze sources and how to not be lied to by the world. And I think you have to teach that to people when they're young, when they're kids. Learn to vet your sources and actually like look things up and find credible sources. And I think if you don't understand that process, then the whole like doing research is just finding something that agrees with you and then like kind of copying that. So I think it is much harder to pick up as an adult than as a child.
I absolutely agree, and I think like going even further, there needs to be an emphasis on scientific literacy, right? Because there are a lot of things in the scientific world that I think people outside of it are not aware of, like the peer review process, right? Like this can also be particularly bad with like predatory journals, journals that do not necessarily go through the peer review process, biases in publications, right? Who's funding the research, things like sample size, right? They might make these overgeneralizations of some results based on a very small sample that may not even be representative of the population, things like that. So identifying those things and being able to critique science, right? I think is one way to approach that gap. But I think it has to specifically be taught. Okay, we can't just assume that people will have scientific literacy because they've taken college classes in science, right?
I mean, I'm lowering the bar even lower than that. I'm saying these people are just getting through a high school science class, and that is it. It's like we're not anywhere near that level that we're talking.
Yeah, no.
I mean, you can make it through. You can make it through college and still not know the basics of kind of critical thinking stuff, and I think it's kind of a tragedy. Like this should be the stuff in kindergarten that we're teaching people how to learn, and I think it really does come before all of the other facts that you're probably going to forget. You should know how to find a trustable source, how to find the opinion of an expert who knows more than you. I think that's one of the most important things, is that as non-experts, there's a certain point of complexity where I will never be able to understand if something is true or false or not in like advanced physics.
Sure,
that
yeah.
It would take me a decade to know enough to know if a physics headline was true or not. And for that you have to trust the experts who know more than you. And I think admitting that and like actively seeking out those experts is kind of like one of the first steps that people need to learn, not to like look on your Facebook feed to know how to feel about it, or look at the first thing you can find on Google.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Sebastian. I absolutely agree with that. I think though it also becomes harder and in a way exhausting with social media too, because you're creating a bubble, right? Like the more, you've seen it, like, I don't know, for example, Instagram. I start clicking on a video of a cat, right? I I have black cats, so I click on a video of a black cat, and then all of a sudden Instagram is promoting all these videos of black cats, right? So
the algorithm at work.
The algorithm at work. So essentially what this means is that if you fall into these kind of conspiracy theories within your social media, it starts to create a bubble, right? You're clicking on this, so more relevant content is thrown at you, and you keep clicking it, and it's like you're like insulated from other information that contradicts what you've already been seeking, right?
I think we're kind of in the find out of part of what happens when you provide infinite information with no quality control to an entire like civilization, and we don't really know. Like that's what we're figuring out now, is what happens when everybody has different information that may or may not be true.
So we have a couple of minutes left, but I just want to wrap up with, I guess, one final question. So for those people who, Sebastian, you mentioned, like critical thinking skills being early, for the people that are way beyond that, the high schoolers, adults, college kids, may not be scientists, what are ways that they can kind of vet things and get more credible information overall? Either of you can answer this. I'm just going off of Sebastian's last point.
For sure. I think the first place to start is like not to look at the news, or at least don't look at the things that you see on social media. I will say, I have been on there. I've seen what goes for science on viral posts and things like that, and pretty much all of it's nonsense. Like if you have a question that you want to answer, you should be going to like CDC, like Harvard Medical Resource. Like you can find whatever question you have. If it's about medicine, if it's about anything, you just need to find a like big name, like academic source that has people that are constantly editing that and, you know, making sure that that information is true. You do not want to go to like the first eHow article you can find on, you know, what medical problem you're talking about. You want to look at professional sources like American Heart Institute. There are a bunch of places where you can find the most current scientific information, and you just have to keep scrolling till you see the like .org or, you know, .gov. Find a good resource.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any particularly great advice. As I mentioned before, I think it can be challenging and exhausting with so much information freely available online. You can just spend hours and hours peeling through information without really getting anywhere. But I do think it's important to kind of maybe always like kind of take a step back and think, you know, if I think this, but a majority of people or other sources are telling me that that's wrong, but I believe I know better, you know, kind of critically analyze, you know, reflect back on yourself and think, why do I think this is right? And why do I think everyone else is wrong? Or kind of try to turn that on its head, right? Why might everyone else be right? Why might I be wrong? So I think it's important to kind of stop and ask ourselves these questions as well.
Acknowledge how little any of us actually know of what's going on around us. I think staying humble is important for that.
Absolutely. Being comfortable in what you don't know, I think, is a really important skill in science.
Yes, it is. And life.
Yeah, I like to think of it as a growth mindset. You can always learn new things regardless of how old you are. That's just my like glass half full approach to this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that too.
All right, that is going to wrap up our show for this week. But thank you so much for listening. I want to thank Andrea. I want to thank Sebastian. This has been That Science and Nature Show. We'll see you next week. But for now, we are out.